Watch me go, go, never slow, slow, make 'em whoa, whoa. Watch me go, 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 watch me go, go, never slow, slow, make 'em whoa, whoa. Watch me go, 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 ready, set, go.
Welcome to this episode. Today I want to talk about getting the most from your Traeger Ranger. It's a pellet grill. I want to be very clear about this. This episode is not sponsored by Traeger. They had nothing to do with this. In fact, they probably don't even know that I exist. The Traeger Ranger is a small portable pellet grill. It was not my first choice, interestingly enough. I had another brand in mind that I was seriously looking at, but according to the reviews and a lot of people online talking about it, there was a couple of issues with it. The company for that particular model fixed the issues, brought out a new version, and in the process also jacked the price up considerably, which kind of opened up the door again to then relook at things that were out there, other brands. This one caught my eye. The reviews were quite good. Traeger's a very well-known brand, and we happened to be able to get it at a pretty decent sale price for Father's Day. And then plus this unit also had a dent in it, so we were able to get an additional discount, and I was happy with the price, and I've been actually thoroughly happy with the unit itself. You'll see that this particular unit is very well used. We are out in the desert, so it does have a bit of dust on it. But also, what you'll find is that with the amount of use that we get, you know, the paint is starting to discolor on the sides. You know, everything is a little bit dusty. I do have to get in here and give this a bit more of a clean, you know, good size hopper. And I've got to get this interior part here cleaned at some point in the next little while. But like I said, a well-used unit. So I'll take a moment to go through some of the highlights of this unit, and then we'll get into how to get the most out of this. Well, as you saw outside, the unit isn't particularly huge. It is a good size. It is relatively heavy. Perfect size for cooking for two, which has made it kind of a necessity for us. Some of the specs that it has that you probably want to know a little bit about. 165 to 450 degree temperature range. 176 square inch cooking space. It comes with a cast iron griddle. It comes with porcelain coated steel grates, 6-foot AC power cord, which is very handy. 250 watts to heat up, and then the running is about 45 watts continuous, which is great because we run this off of our power station. And it comes with a meat probe, which we've never used because it doesn't support Wi-Fi, so I just used the one that we already had.
Before we left, we were going through what things we wanted, and Steve wanted to grill because he likes grilling, and he loved to smoke, but our smoker would not fit into pretty much any rig we would have bought. So we went on the road without a smoker or a grill. We had the Coleman stove and the propane one inside the rig.
It's really old, and I mean it's actually clean, but you couldn't tell it because of the staining that's happened over the many years. All right, this weird lentil and sprout thing.
Perfect.
Actually, that's really good.
He popped into Home Depot, found one, and he bought it, and it is now one of our staple cooking units.
Of course, the manufacturer recommends only the Traeger pellets. I find that to be not really necessary. In fact, most of the pellets that we've used are the big bag that we get from Costco. There's lots of different types of wood pellets available for this thing.
I've started doing the cleaning of the cast iron plate that you do like pancakes on, and he puts the bread on. And the grill, as with most grills, they collect goop, and sometimes they burn off. But I've found a really good method of cleaning, and so I've taken over that cleaning, and it's worked out pretty good. I used Dawn liquid soap on a scrubby.
Now, as far as the maintenance is concerned, you will find after just a couple of uses a fair bit of ash that gets stuck in there. We have a little portable vacuum cleaner that I take to just get that all cleaned out. And then occasionally I will get some scrubbies out and get the grease buildup from the inside of the lid taken care of. I mean, this is a working unit, so it does get fairly dirty, fairly dusty. The one thing that we have found that really helps with the cleanup is the little catch tray that has a little spout that goes out into a little catch bucket. So I would just throw some tin foil on top of that, and that's been enough to, you know, kind of keep the cleanup of the catch tray to a bare minimum. So the things that I want to talk about of getting the most out of your Traeger: grilling, roasting, smoking, baking, and the low and slow, almost barbecue, not 100% barbecue, but almost. So in grilling, our grilling has been mostly hamburgers, pork chops, and chicken. We grill our meat at 400 degrees, and it works fairly well. I do find that I flip things a little bit more often in this grill than I would in, say, my barbecue at home. I just find that the temperatures, even set at where you would, you know, a larger unit, they do have a tendency of getting a little bit intense in this unit, so I do take some care to make sure that things are cooking properly. You're also noticing possibly here that there's a bit of a pinkish hue on these burgers. That is from the smoke, and that is very common in anything that you're going to be smoking. And of course, final temperatures are being gauged by instant read thermometer. For beef, interestingly enough, I usually use our sous vide. I put the beef in the sous vide, and then I just use a pan to put some color on them. So I grill fish at 375.
In addition to meats, he also grills vegetables, though the first time he did it on the grill, they kind of burned and really not that good. So the next time he using the grill, because he was grilling something else, he put parchment paper on and the vegetables on that, and it worked really well.
So I roast everything at 325 degrees on this unit, but I came up with this solution that really helped by putting some parchment paper down. These asparagus have been coated in olive oil, and then I put the butter on top of that. And that really helps with the smoke point of the butter. It doesn't burn because it's mixing with the oil, and it just bastes it very nicely while it's roasting. These were really thin pork chops, so they didn't take much to actually cook those. The temperature could stay low. Once figuring out that little trick with the parchment paper, it has become kind of a standard for us for anything that I'm doing with vegetables. Now, this is also interesting. The edges of this unit all around the outside edges get hotter than the inside. And so you notice that I have turned the chicken so that the tips of those drumsticks are over top of the outside edge, because it's going to get really hot. So instead of having it burn the meat, it can just heat up the ends of the chicken, which, you know, who cares? So here again, vegetables. This was potatoes and carrots and broccoli. I think that's all that was in that one. A little bit of seasoning salt on there. Those have been coated in olive oil. There was also olive oil that was put on the chicken, and then some rub and olive oil was put on the squash. For the squash, after the olive oil, I put a little bit of brown sugar in there and some butter so I could have a sweetened version of that. Seasoning salt and some butter on the vegetables, and we'll just let that go. And you'll also notice that the edge of the parchment paper was starting to get crisp. That's what I mentioned, that the outside edges of this get hotter than the inside, and here you can really see that the parchment paper has got quite dark. The vegetables were not impacted at all during this, and the same thing with the chicken. It's kind of hard to see at this angle, but the very tips of those drumsticks were darker than the actual meat. The meat cooked perfectly, and the squash in the middle of that was absolutely excellent that day. We really enjoyed that meal. And there it is, all done. You can start to see a little bit of caramelization on the edges of some of the carrots. I'm using an instant read thermometer to make sure that the meat is cooked, because again, this was cooked at a bit of a lower temperature. I'm doing this at 325, so it takes a little bit longer for the chicken to cook, but it's about the same amount of time as it would have taken for the squash to finish up. So that actually turned out to be really good.
The smoking aspect of it isn't as good as his dedicated smoker at home, but this does a really good job. I'd say my favorite smoked sausage would be kielbasa.
I made a batch of sausage. Didn't go through the whole process of making sausage. I can do that in another video. The purpose of this one is to get this sausage ready to go into the smoker. This is kielbasa, Polish type sausage, and Libby and I like about a 700 roughly gram, not quite 600. So I'm just taking this batch and turning it into 3 sausages. This will go into the fridge overnight, and then tomorrow we will put this on the smoker. For smoking, I prefer to start my smoker at 100 degrees, and then an hour later I'm moving it up a little bit, and then an hour or two after that I'm moving it up a little bit. This just doesn't have the capacity of going that low, so I'm starting the smoke. Well, the lowest temperature this has is 165, but what I'm doing for the smoking is setting it at 165, but I'm putting the sausages in there right away. So as this unit is heating up, it's able to start the smoke. The other thing is the temperature on this is a little bit finicky. I have this set at 165, and yet it immediately goes up to about 185. So at the lower temperatures, I have often found that this is out by sometimes up to 20 degrees. At the higher temperatures, say 325 and above, it's pretty accurate. We have used an oven thermometer in there to double check, and it seems to be pretty good. So where at home on my smoker, sausages would normally take somewhere around 4 to 5 hours to smoke, this particular batch of kielbasa was done in just over an hour, which is pretty quick. And I kind of thought that it may not have the same, flavor, texture as something that was smoked low and slow, but it was absolutely fine. The sausage actually goes into a water bath as soon as it's smoked to cool it down completely. And then once it has finished its cool down phase, I just put it out on a rack to bloom for a portion of the afternoon. Again, at home, I've got a little bit more room for this, and so I usually will hang the sausage to bloom just in room temperature. and the water bath usually has a lot more ice cubes in it. So this is just going into that blooming phase. The sausage actually has an ingredient in it that allows it to be able to be out at room temperature for a period of time without any grief. This isn't a sausage making tutorial. I can do that in another episode if we need to.
We've even branched out into the baking using the Traeger, and that's because he started with bread, and we brought the bread oven, the cast iron one, and it sort of fits in the oven, but it was so heavy and the bottom burnt, the bottom of the bread burnt. So back to the drawing board, did a few more things in the oven. Then he thought, I'm going to try the Traeger, and he's fine-tuned it, and it works really well as a baking oven. And we just made banana bread. Forgot to try cookies on it, but that's the next one.
Traeger actually indicates that this unit is suitable for baking, and they have, I think, 3 or 4 flavors, types of wood that are suitable for baking. I didn't really think that it was going to be good for baking, but we discovered that once you get used to the temperatures in here, it does a pretty good job. This is banana bread. We don't have a bread loaf with us, so I'm just using a cake tin for this. And the trick to this is every 15 minutes I'm rotating the bread just to make sure that it kind of cooks evenly on all sides. We've made a couple of banana loaves in this. The most recent one was a banana date and pecan loaf, and it was really tasty. Really enjoyed it. This is the final version of that first loaf, and this is the banana nut date loaf. Again, it does a really good job. These are baked at 325 degrees, which again is probably a little lower than what I would do in a home oven. Any higher than that, however, I find that I run into some serious problems with with how much it browns. The Traeger comes with both a grate as well as a cast iron plate, and for making bread I will actually need both of them. We're going to start with the plate and get this thing preheated to 325 degrees. Now that may seem a little bit low, but this is from several practice sessions where I had the temperature up to where I would normally cook bread in a regular oven at home, and discovered that all we ended up doing was burning the bottom of the bread. So 325, and we're going to start with the cast iron plate, and we'll get that started and let that warm up. Lots of rice flour involved. Make sure that it comes out nicely. It goes right on top of the cast iron plate. Put some air creases in there and let it go for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, the bread is going to be just firm enough to be able to move. I'm going to pick it up. Bottom crust is about where you want it, so all I'm going to do is put the grate on and turn the bread and let it go for another 15 minutes to finish up. After 30 minutes, there's our loaf of bread. It's got a nice bottom crust, not burnt. Looks good on the top. Yeah, so this is a nice loaf of bread in the Traeger. Nice crust, makes fabulous sandwich loaves. And of course, if I'm making sandwiches, Morrie's got to get in there for his piece of lunch meat. That's a good boy. That's a good boy. Yes, you are a good boy. A recipe for cinnamon buns would normally cook these at 350 degrees in a regular oven. In order to get the most out of your Traeger, I do these at 325, and they're in here for about 25 minutes. And that seems to be enough. They're just starting to brown, and we want these to be a little bit under brown and hot so that we can slather them with icing. So like I mentioned, two trays of cinnamon buns. We do the little square cake pan and then a round cake pan in order to do one batch. This one, I'm going through a bit more of an explanation on this. I'm making some homemade flour tortillas here because I'm going to be making enchiladas, and the enchiladas need to be baked. And this is just another one of those little hacks, I guess, that we came up with that work out pretty well in the making of this. So flour tortillas, I mean, there's dozens of recipes online. This is one that I kind of developed just over the course of time. It worked for me, and it seems to work out pretty good. It's going to be wrapped up here for about 20 minutes. And then I'm cutting these into equal size little balls. And then those will be pressed with a rolling pin to get them nice and flat. So this particular recipe makes 6 really nice size flour tortillas. I do have a tortilla press, but I don't use it for flour tortillas. They don't work very well. But for the corn tortillas, oh my gosh, that press is just an absolute lifesaver. Just making up a chicken enchilada and then frying up the flour tortillas ahead of time, just in a little cast iron skillet. And all I'm doing is waiting for these things to start to bubble. I keep the temperature in the rig on the stove down to about 4 to 5 on the little scale, so it'll be about a medium heat. And it's just enough to get a nice, it just browns nicely on this. I put about a teaspoon of peanut oil on my griddle between each one, and then just spread it out with a paper towel. And I really like the way that these bubble up. Now, this was something, again, I don't have a pan big enough for this, but this grate, I know that that's the size that it's going to require to go in the unit. So what I did is I took the grate out, I made a little tiny boat out of tin foil, and then put some parchment paper inside of that. It's just deep enough to be able to keep everything together. The tortillas themselves, I'm putting, or the enchiladas, I mean, I'm putting the meat sauce on, rolling these up, and then putting them on top of that homemade cookie sheet, if you will. And the grate, it turns out, is the exact size for 6 enchiladas, which is very good. That gives us enough for one meal. And yes, I cheated. I did not make my own sauce. It was just a canned sauce from one of the local grocery stores here. And then a good dump of cheese. And depending on what cheese I have available, this was just mozzarella and then a bit of cheddar on there. And the only thing that I have noticed is occasionally, as we'll talk about with the pizza in a little while, that sometimes the cheese doesn't brown up as much as I would like. But in this case, it worked out fairly well. These were baked at 350 because, again, the tortillas are already cooked. The filling is already cooked. All I'm really doing is putting it together, allowing the cheese to melt. So 350 degrees was enough. And because this was on the grate, I just had to bring the grate out and put it on top of the cast iron plate. Close it up, give it a few minutes. I think this was in there for about 15-20 minutes just to allow the cheese to melt. And you'll notice that the corner down in the left bottom corner, that's how hot the edges of this thing get. That particular tortilla was hanging over a little bit and ended up getting quite roasted. Not enough to cause any issues. I mean, these were really quite delicious. And there was enough for 2 meals for Libby and I out of this. We'll each have, 1.5 of these and a side salad, or I'll make up some steamed vegetables or something to go with that, and it works out pretty nice. Well, here's another one that I absolutely love in this is deep dish pizza. This is a 12-inch cast iron pan. I am putting it on top of the cast iron that comes with this. You have to kind of finically put this in here. It fits, but just barely. There we go. So once you get it in there, the temperature, I range it between 375 and 400. I've got this at 375. The only issue that I have found with this sometimes is that the cheese doesn't completely brown on the top. But for deep dish pizza, it works very, very well with the cast iron pan. I'll show you the results here in a second.
One of my favorites, I forgot about that, is that we started on making the pizza, the deep dish pizza, in the cast iron frying pan in the oven in the rig. And as it got hot outside, that became like stifling in there. So we tried it in the Traeger, and that works perfectly.
Deep dish pizza. Pepperoni mushroom.
He also did our scalloped potatoes in there. So there's quite a few uses for this. It's not just smoker griller. It isn't a traditional barbecue grill, but he has figured out how to do the long and slow in it with pulled pork and with ribs, and they are, I'd say the ribs are my favorite.
The low and slow, this is not a traditional barbecue. I mean, in traditional barbecue, we talk about indirect heat. This doesn't have that. The fire pot for this is right in the center underneath this. These ribs, however, I do them for 6 hours, and they are amazing. Sometimes I'll cut them in half, arrange them side by side, but if I've got a rack of ribs that fits, I just kind of squeeze them in there, and that seems to work out fairly well. These are done at 190 degrees for 3 hours. There's our 3-hour timer. They've been covered with whatever your favorite rub is, and 3 hours later they're looking like this, which is pretty good. And there's a lot of different people online that will talk about the 3-2-1 ribs, 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. I particularly like Susie Bullock from Hay Grill Hay. I think she has a very good explanation and a good recipe. I don't follow her recipe exactly the way she does it, but it's pretty darn close. So for the second part of this, the 2 hours, the ribs have come off, so they have been left in the smoker at 190 for 3 hours. I've taken them off. I've moved the temperature of the grill up to 220, bone side up. I'm covering this with some brown sugar and then some pats of butter. And then I'm putting, she uses apple cider in hers. I use a combination of mango juice and apple juice, and we have found that gives us a really nice flavor to this. So throw some pats of butter on this. And then I find that the particular brand of tin foil or aluminum foil that we're using isn't big enough to completely wrap these ribs. So you'll see in a moment that I'm using several layers to make sure that I get a completely tight seal on this. I want the moisture from the juice to be basically braising, steaming, whatever, these ribs for the 2 hours at the increased temperature. So yeah, you'll see here that I can make the little boat out of this so that I can put the juice in, and it's not going to leak all over the place, but the edges don't come completely together here. So once I've got at least a little boat so that I'm not having juice pour all over the counter, I'll just pour it inside here. So this is mango juice. I use about an equal amount-ish of mango juice and apple juice. And I find that this just gives a really nice steaming property to these ribs. And like I said, Susie's got all of the measurements for this. As you can tell, what I'm doing, it's just kind of eyeballing it. So from here, I'm going to put a top layer on, and then another bottom layer, and then I'm going to wrap the middle of that and make sure that it's completely sealed around so that I don't have any leak. And you'll also see when I take this off the grill in a little while that I use a little method of opening this right over top of the sink before I try to take anything out. And I don't open it outside, and I don't open it unless I'm standing over a sink. And you'll see that here in a couple of minutes. But again, here's layer number 3. You might also have noticed here that I've never turned these over. It always stays facing the same way, and I'm just kind of moving it from side to side to get it wrapped. I don't want to run the risk of having any of the juice that's been put in there pouring out all over the counter. So once that's done, it is back out onto the grill, and again, the temperature has gone up to 220, and it's going to sit here now for 2 hours. And I'm going to throw in another mention here that this entire cook is being done off of our power station, which is really nice. That we can, no matter where we are, boondocking, whatever, there's enough power to be able to do that. So after 2 hours, you see a little bit of ash that started to accumulate on the top of the tin foil, no problem. And then we're going to get into the 1 hour phase of this, so the 3-2-1 ribs. So here's the method for me to drain these. I'm just putting this right out over top of the sink, and then I'm going to split that tin foil open and let it drain. It comes out of there pretty steamy, and there we go. Just drain off all of the juice before I do anything else with this. So the last phase of these 3-2-1 ribs is to get your favorite barbecue sauce. Now, depending on the ribs, these were St. Louis style, I think is what they call them. So they're a bit more, I find, a bit of a thicker rib. Some other ribs that I've done, side ribs, for example, will often just fall apart at this phase. I can't even move them. They just split apart. These have got a little bit more substance to them. So at this point, they're going back in. Temperature remains the same, 220, and you're just going to cover these with your favorite barbecue sauce. I don't mind putting the barbecue sauce on both sides, keeping in mind that the other side of this is just bone, so I prefer to just put it on the meat side. But this works out fairly well. And really, it's just about whatever the flavor that you want. You've also got a whole variety of different types of pellets that you could use on this. This is just that traditional blend, which is really all I use. It's either this or the Costco blend of pellets, and I find that it's been really good for everything from meat to bread to, you know, vegetables to all the different things that we'd be doing on this. But these ribs are absolutely phenomenal. In fact, just watching this video back, I'm craving ribs again. I'll have to make them again in a few days. In fact, I would suspect I will probably have made ribs again by the time this gets posted. Now, with this, because this is the low-slow, and I do know that the temperatures on the outside of this grill are hotter, even though this is only at 220, about 15 minutes after I've put the barbecue sauce on, I'm putting the corn on and just letting that grill. There's a bit of olive oil on this corn, And I just put it over to the edges because even though this is set at 220, those edges are very warm enough that it actually roasts this corn in the 45 minutes or so that I have left on these ribs. There was probably at least one more coating or two more coatings of barbecue sauce in that 1 hour that they were on there. Little potato salad to go with this, and some corn.
Did you want to taste those ribs?
Yes. Excellent. Overall, I think the purchase of it was an excellent deal. We have used it so much that it is worth buying.
So you probably would have noticed on those ribs a little bit of that pink hue again. That's from the smoke. And these end up with that crust, which is really good. The other one that I didn't mention on the low and slow that we find is really exceptionally good is our pulled pork. And that's one that I will put on. I just buy a small pork roast, and it will be on that lower temperature in that 190 to 200 range. And I'll put that on there all day. It is not unusual for us to have pulled pork out there for 8 to 10 hours, which is amazing. So this is an electric grill. When we have shore power, zero issue using this, but because it draws so little power, I have no problem running this thing for 8 to 10 hours while I'm making pulled pork, just off of the power station, which has become a real benefit to us. The pellets aren't particularly expensive. I mean, it is an extra cost that you have to incur when you're doing this, but there's lots of choices, and if you're just using a small amount for whatever it is you're cooking, you can be changing things up fairly regularly. As far as we are concerned, this has become kind of our go-to cooking appliance. I find that it does a better job than the oven in the rig. The only thing that I had to figure out was the temperatures. Temperatures were really crazy on this. As I mentioned earlier, first time that I made bread, I cooked it at a temperature that I would cook in an oven at home, and we couldn't eat it. It was just burnt. There was nothing left of it. It took a few loaves of bread to bring the temperature down to a place where it would actually cook without burning. And then that little trick of adding the grate on top of the cast iron griddle was also a game changer. It was that one thing that just allowed that little bit of air to circulate below the bread to allow it to just stay at whatever the crust was when I finished it. So very beneficial piece of equipment. And I hope you took a few things away from this. And if you've got a pellet grill, or if you're looking at getting something like a Traeger Ranger, hopefully this has inspired you to come up with some really cool methods of your own to get the most out of your pellet grill. These are the things that we're doing to get the most out of our Traeger. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.